Right, next up we have Marissa Nicosia, who is an assistant professor of Renaissance literature at Pennsylvania State University, Abington College. She's completing a monograph on imagined futures in the 17th century English history play, and has articles on early modern literature published or forthcoming in Modern Philology, Milton Studies, the papers of the Bibliographical Society of America, and Studies in Philology. Her research has been supported by the Folger Shakespeare Library and the Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship of Scholars in Critical Bibliography at Ware Book School. With Alyssa Connell, Marissa founded the public food history website Cooking in the Archives in 2014, and their site has been featured in the Washington Post, CNN.com, NPR's Talk of Iowa, King Arthur Flower's Sift magazine, and Frankie magazine. Please join me in welcoming Marissa.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I know I'm going to do the PowerPoint dance. So today I'm going to be talking about Cooking in the Archives, a public history website I launched with Alyssa Connell in 2014 when we were both two English PhD candidates at the University of Pennsylvania and very enthusiastic home cooks. We set out to find, transcribe, research, and cook recipes from culinary manuscripts in the early modern era. So these are British manuscripts that were produced in households between 1600 and 1800. And these recipe manuscripts are very miscellaneous. They contain the medicinal and culinary knowledge for families, particularly very upper class households, and they were used by men and women in those families. So far, we have cooked and posted 59 recipes, which include 17th century hot chocolate, 18th century macaroni and cheese, jumballs, a lamb shoulder stuffed with oysters, and a very notorious fish custard. To date, we've had over 150,000 individual viewers to the site, and we've had a lot of profiles in news media. We're reaching a lot of people, even though in the site we're really posting our first attempts to cook these recipes. It's a kind of lab notebook that's open to a very broad public. We care a lot about making what we're doing, even in a lab notebook state, available to the broad public because we're working with archives of recipe books that have been previously digitized by major cultural institutions, universities, museums, and libraries. Most of our research has been in the digital collections and the physical collections at the University of Pennsylvania libraries, where we started, and at the Folger Shakespeare Library, where I held a fellowship. But just because something has been digitized professionally and beautifully and is freely available on a library website does not mean that it is actually fully accessible to the general public, which is why the guiding principle behind our project has been updating these recipes and providing a different kind of access. And updating means four main things for us. First, it means transcription. Early modern English handwriting is pretty crazy, and we're producing a searchable, readable version of the recipe that might even help a very experienced cook or home cook, historical reenactor who doesn't have the kind of manuscript training that Alyssa and I have to access a particular text. We also are contextualizing the recipes by dealing with variant spellings, defining obscure techniques, equipment, and ingredients. And that contextualizing is an act of updating that wouldn't have been necessary for an early modern user of this book. We also write out our updated recipes in the format that you would expect if you opened up a cookbook in a Barnes & Noble these days. We have an ingredients section and then a methods section. The recipes in early modern manuscripts are usually narrative paragraphs instead of divided into this more scientific or modern framework. And finally, our method. We are not striving at all to do the wonderful work that other people are doing in reenacting or hearth cooking or recreating these recipes using original techniques. We are using our blenders, we are using our refrigerators, we're using our modern ovens, and even modern flour that we're buying from Trader Joe's or somewhere is very different than early modern flour. And we have decided to embrace the inauthenticity of what we are doing because it allows for a different kind of access to these foods. Now, I've also been thinking a lot about how this work that I'm doing on cooking in the archives is a method for manuscript studies and historical scholarship. This is a dish of Portugal eggs. It's a recipe that's not up on the blog yet. It will be eventually. And I did not understand what this recipe was at all until I went through the process of making it. And I've been really inspired by work coming out of sociology on inactive ethnography, or carnal sociology, the work of Loic Lecointe and Karen Cruello, and also in history, Pam Smith's Making a Knowing Lab at Columbia, where teams of faculty and graduate students are working with a 17th century artisanal manuscript and doing recreation work there. So this is the recipe for Portugal eggs in the University of Pennsylvania's Kislak Center Manuscript Codex 785, and I'm going to read it. To make Portugal eggs, take a very large dish with a broad brim. Lay in it some Naples biscake in the form of a star. Then put so much sack into the dish as you think the biscakes will drink up. Then stick them full with little pieces of preserved orange and green citron peel, and strew store of French comfits over them of diverse colors. Then butter some eggs and lay them here and there upon the biscakes. Then fill up the hollow places in the dish with several colored jellies, and round about the brim thereof lay laurel leaves gilt with leaf gold. Lay them slanting, and between the leaves several colored jellies. Now, this is not actually a Portuguese dish. The cue that the connection to Portugal is with the sack here, an ingredient of kind of sherry fortified wine that was coming into England from Portugal. So there are a number of dishes that have Portugal in the name that are not actually Portuguese. And the other thing I learned when I was investigating this recipe is that it's not actually original to this recipe book at all, this recipe manuscript. It's a verbatim transcription of Hannah Woolley's recipe for Portugal eggs from her 1670 cookbook, The Queen-like Closet. Hannah Woolley was a sort of 18th century lifestyle guru who would give you advice on manners, etiquette, and also recipes. Now, this was a very popular kind of banqueting dish, this dish of Portugal eggs. It appeared on the menu for James II's coronation. Now, learning all of that helped me understand some of the connections between this particular recipe book and Hannah Woolley's cookbook. There are actually 4 recipes that are shared between the two, but I didn't really understand what this dish was supposed to be until I went about making it. It required 6 sub-recipes, and I didn't even gild the laurel leaves at all before I assembled the dish. So I used 2 recipes from MS Codex 785 to make the Naples biscuits, the fluffy biscuits that then get soaked in alcohol, and to make the jelly I used to kind of fill in between the eggs. I used Hannah Woolley's recipe to coat fennel seeds and sugar, French comfits, and there are also some there from a local shop that I picked up. I used my own tried and true recipe for candying orange peel, and I prepared simple scrambled eggs for my buttered eggs after investigating what they were. Once I kind of assembled all of this on the plate, I understood more about the Concordia discourse of this particular banqueting dish within the kind of miscellaneous bounty of the early modern banqueting table. I'd read Ken Albala's work on this, I'd read the recipe, but until I actually went through the process of putting it all together, it didn't fully make sense to me. So, to conclude, recipes are instructions for cooking. And I think that sometimes we can lose sight of that if we're sitting around in the archive reading these recipes in a place where we can't even bring a water bottle in with us. And they provide us some profound insights into the networks of women who were keeping these recipes, who were drawing from other sources. This is a book that was probably owned by a woman using sources from a female published cook, Hannah Woolley. And they also help us locate global and local networks of people distributing recipes to communities, and also how ingredients were moving around particular regions and globally, either through trade and or exploitation. So we can't necessarily taste the past. This is a radically inauthentic project in certain ways, but we can access the past in different ways by trying to cook it. And furthermore, I think when we share the work we're doing, even when it's trial and error, even if it's sort of a lab notebook, we're inviting, and we make that public, we're inviting a broader public into a conversation about histories that other institutions are already trying to provide them access to. So thank you very much.